Hi, Cindy.
Wait a minute. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing just fine.
Good. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too. Did you have a nice holiday?
Well, actually, my son had COVID, so I had a quarantine holiday,
No, oh no.
but
Well,
it was fine.
my daughter had COVID as well, but she's 26, so it wasn't in the home. Yeah,
Mine had COVID as well, and she's 27.
yeah,
Oh, there you
But it
go.
wasn't in the
Yeah.
home either. It wasn't in the home either.
yeah.
Like, stay over there wherever you are.
Yep,
Yeah,
I
I'm
know.
surprised I don't have it or haven't gotten it again.
Yeah, I tested negative 3 times in that span. I was surprised too.
Yeah. How old's your son?
He's 10,
10, yeah.
and my
Was it
daughter
rel-
also tested negative, and she's 7.
Mm-hmm.
So
And was it relatively mild for him?
he had a very high fever for
Did he?
about 36 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
It was scary after 24 hours,
Mm.
when you hit the wall of Tylenol and Motrin and like, okay, what do you want me to do now?
Right.
Cool water baths. I remember doing that and getting
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. The washcloths and everything, but
Yes.
he had the chills, I mean, it was fine once the fever broke and he, recovered fluids and food for the next 36 hours. And then we spent the rest of the quarantine with him and my daughter just bouncing off the walls.
Jeez.
Yeah, I bet. Was it over Christmas?
It was over Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's okay. I didn't mind. I had already planned to work from home for that week. And so I already had everything at home. And it was almost a relief for that vacation week because the answer was already no to everything,
Right, right, exactly. And now you had a good excuse.
Right. Oh, of course we can't,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
So, stay home, play with all these toys. Come on.
right, right.
So, hi, Leslie. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Chris. Hi, Leslie.
Hi. I'm
You're
sorry to
muted,
hear.
Chris. There we go.
Welcome. I see Jen, and Jen, I'm sorry. I did not send you a panelist. I just spaced this afternoon. So I'm going to promote you so you
And
can
Chris,
join
you're,
us.
Chris, you're still muted. There you go. No, you still are. Nope, don't hear you.
There you go.
There
Now you
There
can
we
hear me.
go.
There he is.
Okay.
Um,
So hello, everybody.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
Well, we might as well get started. This is the Dogtown Preservation Commission meeting of Thursday, January 27th, 2022. It's 5:30 p.m. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. And this meeting is being recorded. In the event that a live transmission proves unworkable for any reason, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the meeting will be made available on the city's website as soon as possible. With that, I'll call the meeting to order and I'll do a roll call of attendance. Adrian,
I'm here.
Richard,
Present.
Leslie,
Yep.
Chris,
Present.
Val is absent and Mike is absent. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 18th, 2021?
So moved.
And a second?
A second.
All those in favor by roll call? Adrian,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. The minutes are approved. So I see that Jen Holmgren is here. Jen, you were going to be with us last time we met, but you had to leave suddenly. But Jen is with the North Shore Health Project, and she is going to give a presentation on your no harm project, Jen?
Our harm reduction center. And actually, hi everybody.
Harm
Thank you.
reduction.
Yes, I was wondering, our harm reduction program director, Molly Morey, is actually in the audience. Would it be possible to promote her as well? And this stems from the needles that were found in Dogtown back in, what was it, August, I think. But oh, there's Molly and Frank.
You're small. Hi, Molly. Welcome.
So we wanted to reach out to the Dogtown Advisory Commission and just talk with you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Thank you very much for having us. So Molly, I don't know if you are able to tell us, okay, the mission of One Stop, and I'll be happy to fill in where I can.
Hi, I'm Molly.
I'm Molly.
Hi. I'm the program manager over at One Stop Harm Reduction, and we're part of the North Shore Health Project, but the services we provide are like syringe exchange services, Narcan trainings and distribution, free testing for HIV, Hep C, syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea. We have like a drop-in center where the people that use our services can, in non-COVID times, like come hang out, have some food, have some coffee and stuff like that. And then we also do mobile outreach in a couple different cities. So we do Gloucester, we do Haverhill, Ipswich, we do follow-ups in Manchester, Essex, Rockport, Beverly. So yeah, that's what we do over there.
Now, I was hoping that if you all had questions or concerns about finding syringes in the woods, that you would be comfortable reaching out to us. We actually went to that site in Dogtown a couple of times. We're not funded to do general cleanups, unfortunately, although I did do that on my own time. I went with friends a couple of times and put some of that trash in yellow bags and took it away, but that wasn't as an employee of the health project. But we are willing and able to do outreach and to help with syringe pickup. We want this community to be as safe and accessible as everybody else does. I didn't know if anybody had any questions or if you would like our contact information to take that down for the minutes.
Yes, please.
All right. So we are located at 9 Center Street in Gloucester.
Yes.
We're right across from K9 Cuts. And I'm just making sure I have the correct phone number, although we're really reachable at the main number for the health project as well. So the One Stop Harm Reduction Center telephone number is 978-865-3924. And our outreach cell phone number is 978-381-3. Oh no, is that not the right? I'm sorry,
That's
we
the
changed
old
it.
one. It's okay.
Apologies. Sorry.
Do you have the new one, or I do?
If you have the new one, thank you.
It's 978-515-0455.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, we just got a new number, so.
And that is for outreach?
Yes, yes. So if usually on Fridays we do outreach in Gloucester, but depending on how the office is staffed, certainly during the week we could, run out if needed. But a lot of Fridays are usually our Gloucester day. Leslie?
Jen and Molly, it's really nice to have you here. I missed the news about the finding of syringes in Dogtown, but it's not surprising that they've been kind of all over town. Is there anything you would feel like sharing with us, or feel like we ought to be aware of on the commission around the ways your clientele use Dogtown, and whether there are specific parts of Dogtown that tend to be more accessible to your clientele. I'm just curious about the bigger picture.
I'm not really sure how to answer that. I mean, we certainly help people who are unhoused. And part of what we do is to try to link them up with housing services. Of course, because of COVID, there's been a crunch on the action shelter. So they unfortunately don't have as many beds available. But a lot of the time, if people do use Dogtown, they camp there, whether they're using syringes or not, just because they're unfortunately forced to live outside. And actually, I live in West Gloucester, and there are homeless camps behind my house as well.
Mhm.
Is that
Do you,
kind of?
do you happen to know if there's any social work outreach in the woods?
Not that I am aware of. We always encourage people to use the Grace Center as well. I believe they have a social worker on staff.
They do.
But not as far as I know. Molly, do you know?
Not so far as I know, with like any social worker specific. I do know that Action has somebody that does outreach to unhoused people living in the woods, and I know that we have in the past as well. I don't know like specifically where people might be living or camping right now. That can kind of oftentimes be difficult information for somebody to give us.
Sure.
But I do know that there are certain parts of Dogtown that are used more than others for people to set up shelter at.
So to follow up on that, I'm in Dogtown, off and on. And I sometimes run across people who I assume there may be a tent nearby or something like that, are sleeping in the woods and whatever. There's often maybe a small group of people or whatever. Nothing untoward going on that I can tell. I guess what I'm asking is about a security question. And since there's drug use potentially involved, I know not all of these people use drugs necessarily, or whatever. Is there a concern there that?
In my experience, and it's been, I'm fairly new to the game here. I've been at the Health Project for about 9 years, but I've only been full-time for the past few months. People who use drugs try to just stay below the radar as much as possible. I have never felt unsafe working with this population. And there was actually a question of whether or not people had left drugs at that particular campsite, but they were not drugs. They look like little pills, but they're actually pieces of cotton. I guess, Molly, if you have anything to add about that, but I don't think there is a security concern. Thank you.
Yeah, good to know.
I have a question, Jen.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I was just going to add, for the security thing, I would say that people living in the woods and that are unhoused are no more or less dangerous than anyone in a house. So typically when I see a camp in the woods and I come across one, I just kind of try to leave them be, and they usually will leave you alone as well.
Yeah, that's been my approach, but I just, you're the expert, so.
Sure.
This question is for either one of you. So if you're not physically going and finding folks, how do you reach your clients, and how would you know that they're in Dogtown? Do your clients come to you, or?
Thank you, Cindy. They do come to us. We develop a rapport with them. Sometimes through word of mouth, we learn where they're camping, and that's how we've been able to do outreach to them recently. They do move sites around a bit, though. Is that right, Molly?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's more about building up trust with somebody so they will tell us where they're living. And if they're living in the woods around here, there's a good chance it could be part of Dogtown.
It takes a long time for people to really start opening up to us sometimes, sometimes not.
Mhm.
We try to be as welcoming and non-judgmental as possible.
Mhm. Does
We
anybody-
actually offer Narcan trainings. If any of you is interested, we'd be more than happy to train you on the use of Narcan, which is an opioid agonist. It's very inert, and it reverses the effects of an overdose.
I'm trained,
Oh, great. Oh, thanks, Leslie. That's good to hear.
but I sure hope not to meet people who are in need of Narcan in Dogtown.
Yes, it's better to have it and not need it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would like to just mention a question about human waste in Dogtown, because where there are encampments, that may be a more consistent problem than drug paraphernalia or trash. And I think it's a question for this committee. At what point encampments become an issue for those who are in them and those others who may be using the area.
Mhm.
I guess it's a perennial issue. I'm not really sure how to answer that, except to say, or it's not a question for us, it's a question for the
I
committee.
don't think so, right?
Right. Does
I
anybody
guess-
have, oh, go ahead, Chris.
Well, it's Chris, I guess my response is it kind of goes back to our initial question about, where people are and how many there are. And, if there are certain places where, numbers of people, I don't mean hundreds or even dozens, but regular encampments, then I think the issues of, health issues become more significant. So that for me, those two things are tied together. It seems to me that there are a lot of issues tied to, where people are. And, if there are just a few people and they're scattered all over, then, and since there haven't apparently been big security issues or any security issues or whatever, then maybe this is a non-issue, but it does raise, in my mind, the question of where people are. So.
I'm wondering if this was the first identification of needles in Dogtown that you're aware of, or if there's been previous episodes.
Not the first, no.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I think that there's always been some people living in Dogtown.
Mhm.
Unfortunately for them, I would guess that it doesn't become a real issue unless they're in close proximity to the watershed, water supply with the waste.
A huge
Well,
part of Dogtown, of course, is in watershed land. So,
but also to that point, when I have come across encampments, they're very close to the water supply, so that they themselves can access water for cooking and cleaning.
yeah, that makes sense.
We've talked a little bit.
The encampments are definitely in the watershed.
We've talked a little bit inside the city about setting up signage, off-trail signage sort of on the trees, just as you would see like in backcountry wilderness areas that identify when you are within 100 or 200 feet of the watershed area. Typically in backcountry settings, you're not supposed to camp in those areas. But for these purposes, the objective would really be to try to help everybody understand where they should be creating human waste, and as far obviously away from that as possible. That would be the objective, really, through the water department, would just be clearly identifying that it's a surface water supply area and drinking water supply area, and to be mindful of that.
Well, realistically, I don't think that's on folks who are camping there illicitly, it's not going to make any difference.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've known a lot of people who have camped in the past, and their goal is really to live off the land in the lightest footprint possible, typically. So sometimes just a little bit of education can help at least reduce the problem. I certainly wouldn't expect it to be solved altogether. Well, thanks for coming, Jen and Molly.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you all for having us. And please, again, don't hesitate to call or just come in. It's lovely to talk with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops. We'll let that end. Not sure the feedback is coming from. Okay, moving right along, we're going to go to continued business. The Dogtown Preservation Funds went through the subcommittee level and then I believe went through the city council, but now that we have a new city council, I'll check with Val to make sure that that was approved, but we won't need to review that every month unless there's a change to it. So, but I will follow up with Val. I was hoping she'd be here for a little while tonight, but I realize she has another commitment. Richard, Open Space Liaison. Any news?
Hold on, let me just finish typing.
Oh,
Here we go. Yes, Open Space Committee met last night for a marathon, almost 2.5-hour meeting, and are going through goals and objectives in great detail. And there's certainly a great deal of overlap between the goals of the DPC and the goals of OSRC in terms of seeking to have better levels of protection, especially in, the North Woods and these disparate properties where there's uncertain ownership. But I think there's great opportunity to work together over the next few years.
just muted myself. Great, thank you, Richard. Now it's time to move on to our priorities, the next steps in the timeline. And we've sort of been, the last few meetings kind of identifying some of the priorities that we all participated in. And I'm hoping that, tonight we can sort of come up with some real working groups to kind of begin some of the on the ground work for some of these items. And the first one, of course, is the compost facility. And Leslie and I have had a conversation about the compost facility. I think some of the others of you have as well, but never in a quorum. So I just want to get your thoughts on our next steps and what approach we should take to sort of get the attention of the city council or their subcommittees, get some attention to this.
Would you like me to jump in?
Jump in.
Okay. Really, what I will try to convey is some ideas that have come out of the working groups that have been informally meeting. So, and I'll do my best to summarize those as I recall them. Any of you who have other thoughts, please jump in to correct and amend. So a couple of ideas. One is related to the upcoming budget cycle, to make sure we are plugged in to the decision process as early as possible. And I think that's something you brought our attention to, Adrian, when we were meeting at the end of 2021. So to jump in and get plugged into the budget cycle with a couple of goals in mind. One is to address funding for a change in the way that organic refuse is picked up now. And that's gonna require a little additional spending from the city, but really in order to begin addressing this immediately and reduce the increase in the dump load that is on Dogtown land. So that's part A. And part B is certainly needs some additional fine tuning, but the overall hope was to think about asking for funding to come up with very specific options for relocating the dump and restoring the existing site. And that came out of recognizing that within the person power of this committee, we may not have the expertise to review the sites in the city and to put in context with how other towns have handled a challenge like this, the options for assessing specific alternate sites and coming up with a restoration plan. So we thought maybe this is a way to, on the one hand, ask the city to make an immediate step towards redressing the problem, and to ask for help in shaping a proposal that is really specific and will go towards a short to medium term solution, whatever form that may take, whether it is permanently agreeing to ship our organic refuse out of the city or find a spot within the city. And so that's the concept. Adrian, in particular, we were eager to hear your thoughts on how to think about what the ask is for both of these things. And regarding the second one, which could feel kind of amorphous, how to condense it into something really specific that we can get funded and that we can get constructive, actionable results from, that we will be able to persuade the city to come up with to join us in finding a long-term plan.
Right. Really good questions. So I think the first of these, you're in the right place in terms of you have a really specific ask for the funding around JRM services. You are going to be hopefully starting your conversation with City Council, now about that, because we're coming into February. They'll be thinking about it. There will be a point where Council is going to be reviewing the DPW budget, and hopefully you will have communicated with enough city councilors at that point that they're going to be asking for that discussion with the DPW when they're going through budget appropriations. So now is the time to start looking for a champion or champions inside of City Council for the funding. And I think that if you are asking for it and also going directly to the executive office, there's no reason to think that the executive office is going to say no to this. It's certainly worth all efforts to open that conversation too. That is relationship building first. And I think that, at a minimum, you do have Councillor Gilman on your side, right? And in your corner to kind of notify you of when you should be requesting a position on the agenda and when you should be speaking a public comment period and when to attend, because as council president, no one is going to know the council's movements better than her. And then on the other piece, I really like the idea. I think it's a very smart idea. And I'm trying to think about if it's possible to scope it within work that the city is already doing or other needs of the city. And if it's not, then are there grant opportunities that we can be looking for restoration work, which would not necessarily be pointing directly at the fact that there's a compost facility there, but more at the fact that it's a blighted site. So, and what it would take to restore the site, right? And so that might be an easier avenue to access funding and, say, okay, we're preparing this, or we want the city to go after this grant objective for this particular scope for restoration. And we need a partnership to do that, right? But but we're not in, we don't anticipate an additional burden or encumbrance on the taxpayer at this time for this work, because we're going to have it underwritten until
Can I ask,
next year when we come back and then ask for support, right?
Adrian, is the CPA a possible place for us to look?
No, so the function of the CPA is for capital improvement opportunities. It is not for operations and maintenance. So if we were going to be putting something in there, anything in there that was an open space appropriation, then you could potentially spin it for a CPA qualification, but really the CPA is intended to be for capital and not to be for anything that would end up falling under operations.
Okay, so those were really good summaries, but as I was thinking about it, so we really could create a couple of working groups or a working group for this. The first is the JRM piece and getting the 7 pickups per year taken out of Gloucester. But, Adrian, you were talking about going to the city council, which is great, but don't we have to put that in the budget through Mike Hale first? And then advocate to the city council to approve that additional expenditure? I mean, Mike's not here tonight. I was hoping he would weigh in on that. If it's 15 grand, 16 grand, then we would make that request of him.
Right.
Then we would, promote it at the city council level.
Right. And
So-
I just can't stress how important it is that you have counselors looking for this in the
Right,
budget.
exactly. Yep. Yeah, but we'll need to get with Mike, first of all. And then there's that piece. And then there's the whole piece of designing a scope of work
Right.
for the strategic plan or the solution plan, looking at what we are going to do and try to find alternative sites. So that could be something that a few folks could be working on, as well as developing some sort of scope. And maybe we can bring some people outside of the commission to assist with that.
Mhm.
And then the third piece is the funding mechanism. And I'm glad you clarified that, because I thought the CPA actually would be a great spot to go, because it would be restoration of open space. And they don't get a whole lot of proposals for open space. Most of them are historic preservation. And so I thought of something. The other thing we could do is Leslie was saying is, and you were saying, is that we could look for a nonprofit to partner with on something like that. That is probably going to be the harder sell, because I think there'll be more money associated with that.
Mhm.
Just, can we go back to the CPA for a moment? And I appreciate this is not their usual cup of tea and they may be precluded, but I just want to understand is there a possibility you can make the case that open space itself is an asset and that Dogtown is a historic asset?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I don't think there's any question about its asset value. It's a matter of what you're attempting to do. So, it's a, acquisition to expand the footprint of Dogtown absolutely does fall within the purview of CPA. And of course, there's a lot of that has been used in collaboration with Essex County Greenbelt to help them kind of build their war chest of public land in Gloucester. But when it comes to trying to fund a project, this, a blighted site, cleaning up a blighted site is going to be hard to sell as a capital improvement in open space.
Can I just come around from another side? What if hypothetically we could find a site which could be an alternate location for the organic dump? Could you imagine a case could be made to CPA to help acquire that?
Yeah, maybe. Although the thing about CPA funding is that when you receive CPA funding for the parcel, then it is automatically under Article 97. And I
That
don't
wouldn't
know
work.
if Article 97 would allow that kind of use.
Well, that's what we're kind of resting our hat on partially,
Yeah.
is that the current
Right.
dump is Article 97.
Right.
Right. Right. So that's a little bit of a loop-de-loop.
So these
Yeah,
are all.
I mean, I mean, you can always approach the CPA and have a conversation with them about that, but my initial reaction is that it would be a little bit difficult to navigate a discussion around something that is very much an operations problem, and turn it into a capital request, you know. But I do think that there are other smaller grant funding opportunities in restoration that are worth exploring and would also maybe help scope the work, like I said, and kind of focusing less on what it is currently as a compost site, and focus more on what we're hoping for it to become, which is back to being a functional and restored habitat.
So this problem strikes me as having a front and a back, and the front is how to help the city solve the problem of where else the organic waste can go, whether it's shipped out of town by JRN or in another, and until we solve that problem, we can't even get to the question of restoration.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you can pursue them both in parallel and say, this is what we want to see here. And again, this is the same conversation we had at the last time, where it says, are you going to show your entire hand at once or ask it for it in pieces,
Yeah.
Well, again,
But I think Leslie's analysis, though, does, to me at least, point out that the front part, that as she describes it, is understandably not within the CPA's purview generally. But I would think ecological restoration of Dogtown, once the back is being addressed, might well be within CPA's purview.
Yeah, I mean,
yes, right?
It's certainly worth exploring. I will say, the CPA program is a Commonwealth program. And so there's a huge resource online on the Commonwealth website where they are posting projects that are approved and how they're funded in all kinds of different municipalities. So, you don't have to build, lift from the ground up and kind of see if there's other things out there and that could be made to fit.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
so lots of great things. Again, let's go back to sort of putting a plan into action. So again, I see a couple of working groups that we could get out of this. I think an immediate conversation needs to happen with Mike, and then some outreach to city councilors. I'm happy to be part of that group. If anybody on the commission wants to join me, we could start on that right away. The second would be having a couple of people work on the scope of the action plan that we want somebody to develop for us, because before we can ask for any sort of funding for that RFP, we have to have at least a basic scope of work and who we would be looking to hire. And then once we have that, I think we can approach some funding mechanisms. We may not have a parallel 501c3 right in Gloucester, but we could approach Essex County. So it almost seems like there's 3 pieces of work in our next steps. Is that how everybody else sees it, or what are your thoughts?
Just for taking notes here, I have one was meet with Mike and start exploring alternatives.
Yeah, the first
Two
piece.
is-
The first
and-
piece would just be changing the contract or implementing a different provision of the contract. So yes, that would be meeting with Mike and city councilors.
Question,
Cindy,
go ahead.
thank you.
I was going to say, in terms of the scope of work, are we talking about the scope of work for the compost facility or the scope of work for Dogtown big picture?
I was thinking specific to the compost facility,
Okay,
exploring alternate sites, including, out of Gloucester. And then should that plan also include a restoration piece?
Yep.
And
So,
understood. Yep.
yeah,
Makes
I'm
sense.
wondering, it seems like, I'm wondering if one action, one group is exploring alternatives. And secondly, the other would be to draft the scope, or is your thought that the consultants brought in to develop this action, one of their tasks would be to explore alternatives? So
That's
one
what
is two is remediation and one is explore alternatives.
they may have different disciplines. What are your thoughts, Richard? I mean, you're pretty well in the know on that. Would looking for alternative sites be completely different than restoration? It seems like they could be.
Depending upon the firm, it might be a team. Two different, two companies brought in, one who's like a restoration specialist, and the other would be solid waste specialists. But there certainly are firms that have that both in-house, or they could pull a team together.
And they would also have somebody that would be looking at various parcels.
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
that's helpful.
And cost analysis if it was to go to like a private facility someday. Do you think an entity could do something like that? The same entity?
Yeah, I mean, it's the danger becomes scope creep.
Okay, explain that to me.
Probably all
creep.
familiar with that. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
scope creep is when you give someone a contract for, and Adrienne is cracking up because she knows it. You give them tasks A, B, and C, and then it becomes A1, A2, A3,
Mhm.
and then suddenly you also have D, E, and F in there, and there's change order requests. So
Yeah.
if the RFP were put together very tightly with a lot of thought, you can help avoid that.
I think it's worthwhile actually to just loosen up your idea around what you're really looking for in consulting services and in terms of scope, and just focus on, what are the 3-sentence objectives here? Because when you're looking for funding sources, you're going to have to kind of shift your language a little bit anyways. So, just kind of staying at the higher level right now, especially before you've figured out how you're going to fund your objective, is probably the best way for you to make the most options available to you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, while you're right there, do you have any sense of what something like that would cost? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Right. So the worst thing,
any
as a former consultant, we used to
Yeah.
hate it when people would say, "What do you think it would cost?" Because you'd say 25,000, and they lock onto that number, and then when you really work out the scope, it's actually 32 or 35, and then it becomes
Or
problems.
100.
Or 100. I mean, to just to do the investigation of alternative sites and cost analysis, that could be a 10 to 25, anywhere between 10,000 and 25,000, depending on how much time is required to develop a remediation plan. 5 to 10, I would think. Yeah.
Mhm.
Depends how much detail is. I mean, because to put together, I've done this before when we've dug out contaminated properties and turned it into new wetlands, and just the wetland consultant aspect of it with their planting plans, and to actually, just not even to do the work, just the plans, can run up to a significant amount of money. So Chris, do I think it's 100,000? No, but it could be 50,000. Yeah, it could be. I would hope not. I would hope it would be more in the half that range.
Well, it would,
I wonder, do we need consultants for every aspect of the project? In other words, is there not something, do we need to pay someone to explore, alternate sites in Gloucester? I mean, I've already had some people suggest, people who kind of know the landscape, suggest some possibilities. I'm just wondering whether, there's a, cleanup consultant, and then there's a find a new site consultant, and then there's, how do we deal with the, existing compost system consultant, and then the restoration consultant. I'm just wondering, we have a lot of expertise around, and I'm wondering if we can't make some use of that would keep the price tag, not only the price tag, but the sort of the A1, A2 aspect of it from sort of ballooning.
and some of that work was done, Chris, and the when I first joined the DAC, when they were meeting over at SIBS,
Yep.
we all took like 5 or 6 parcels of property. He had a whole list. So I'm going to go through some of the documents that I had. Many of them were ruled out pretty quickly.
Yep.
We were mostly just looking at city-owned properties that were from a certain acreage that weren't pristine, because the last thing we want to do is blight another area,
Right.
So, but we didn't do a cost analysis of having it done privately. And I think that, we probably could find some people that could give us at least some quick calculations. I imagine it's going to be pretty expensive.
I would
focus,
think JRM could actually, or some
Right.
of the other compost people like Black Earth
Exactly.
could be helpful just to give us some ballpark ideas.
Mhm.
The other
And
thing that occurs to me in this context is that, I think we can probably all agree that the current site is a blighted kind of thing. But it occurs to me that a composting facility does not have to be this horrible, ugly thing that was created thoughtlessly and just, destroying the landscape, et cetera. I'm guessing, they're not being an expert on compost facilities, but there is a way to design the facility so that it's not, something that nobody wants in their neighborhood, or
Right.
that at least has a fairly low profile. So,
Point well taken.
Yeah.
There also are lots of other surrounding communities that do curbside collection of yard waste and
Yes.
don't have a facility in their town. So we could explore
Exactly.
what it costs other towns to take it. And that I don't think would be difficult. It would just be a matter of records request or something. So
I'd be glad to be on a scoping group if that's what you're looking for, volunteers. So.
that would be great. And I'd be happy to be on, I'd be happy to, maybe what we could do is let me find those documents, and maybe we could sort of divvy up some of those parcels of property. And, somebody email me tomorrow if they want to go have a meeting with Mike. Adrian, when we start looking at restoration, wouldn't that be wonderful? Community development would probably be a more natural piece, right, in you than Mike Hale and DPW. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. So maybe the commissioners can email me tomorrow and tell me where their interests lie, because we covered a lot of ground, and we can start working on this. And I will try to set up a meeting with Mike Hale for early next week and start reaching out to some of the city councilors. Anybody who wants to do that with me, just email me. Should we move on? Okay.
Yes.
Dogtown mapping. Chris, you've been doing a lot of work in that area.
Okay. Did you all get the map I sent today?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. As you see, the original map that we looked at when we were meeting in person was a basic outline. And my memory is that we pretty much agreed that, yes, we can use this as a definition of Dogtown, basically. We've since tweaked the lines a little bit to make them more according to existing topographic features or roadways or whatever, but basically it's as presented there. This next map is a first shot at mapping basic land use within that area. We will be working within that outline going forward. If you'll recall, that outline is basically a combination of the existing trail map, which is very well thought out, or whatever, plus the North Gloucester Woods project, which was also very well thought out and well completed. And so those two pieces are what make up that sort of Dogtown map. The map that I hope you all got today, as I said, tries to put on the map some basic elements of the sort of the landscape of Dogtown, including there's some basic topographic things like water bodies and things like that, but basically it's about ownership. And so the watershed lands are there. This little odd polygon sort of right in the center, which has all these strips. These are old, woodlot grants from the old days, kind of, and they've been bought up, given whatever, in various ways. The purple indicates city ownership. There's a blue element that is Gloucester tax taking. So again, those are in a similar category in a way. Then there's an area in green that the Gloucester Concom has purview over. Gloucester watershed is mapped, quite a significant area. The Greenbelt land is mapped, etc. New England Forestry, and since we're considering part of Dogtown as being in Rockport, there's Rockport Concom land and Rockport water. I now have another iteration of the same map, basically, but making it a little bit clearer and with some additional categories. One of the clear things is that the purpose of this, obviously, is to say, is to get to what of Dogtown, as we consider the definition, is protected and what is permanently protected. And some of this, there's a question, I think, for Adrienne here. My understanding is that watershed land is under the auspices of the city, for example, and that though there are procedures, I'm not sure this is a Chapter 97 issue, but there are procedures that in a given instance could be followed in which watershed land could be decommissioned as watershed land and used for other purposes that we would consider non-conservation purposes. But again, without babbling on further, the basic purpose here is to, and if you take lands that I would consider sort of quote unquote permanently protected, i.e. the Greenbelt land, the New England Forestry land, et cetera, that's a much smaller acreage than if you take all of these different areas that are big picture protected lands and map those. And so that's kind of the direction that we're going. Before finishing my speech here, I want to go to a question that Leslie asked me earlier, which is, does my mapping consultant, Jim McDougall, do we have the ability with these computer maps to take any one of these sections, polygons, whatever you want to call them, and get an acreage reading? And the answer is yes. It's a couple of clicks away, according to him. So that's the answer to that question. So comments, questions, thoughts?
I will answer your question about watershed lands, which is to
Okay.
say, you are correct. However, that would also involve decommissioning a certain capacity of the reservoir itself, which
Mhm.
is not likely to ever happen. We're always aiming to increase capacity. It's also true that watershed lands enjoy what is considered limited protection. So similar to the way Article 97 is limited protection, watershed lands do not whole and completely restrict development of all kinds in the way that a conservation restriction does. So there are other structures, uses, utilities that can go into watershed lands that would not otherwise be able to go into a property that was under a conservation restriction, which is why, for example, there are pump stations, and there's utility footprint out there, and there are dams and things like that for the purpose of providing, public services and the water utility to the community. But it's also true that, things like solar fields are considered exempt, even though they're not related to water.
Or windmills, perhaps,
Right.
so that,
Right. So, and that does transform a landscape too.
indeed.
So,
Yeah. And so in addition to actually transferring lands or whatever, my understanding, and thank you, that was a very good description of the scope of what might happen in the watershed lands. Is it also the case that if somebody decided, oh, this is a perfect place for a wind farm, that forest areas could be cleared or other habitats altered, shall we say? Is that correct?
it would be a heavy lift, but yeah, I mean, it's not impossible.
No. Okay.
Yep.
Just from a legal point of view or regulatory point of view, it's not impossible. It could happen.
Mhm. Yeah.
And thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
What do you think? Is this helpful?
Oh, I think it's great. Thank you. But I do have one question, Chris.
Yep.
When it marks the city in purple, but the Gloucester tax taking in blue, kind of the light
Yes.
blue. When Gloucester does a tax taking, it is City of Gloucester land. Is there some sort of protection difference in the purple and the blue?
I don't believe so, but I'm a little fuzzy on that distinction as well. My map maker is using certain criteria to identify and code these different things, and that's one I'm not quite clear on.
Okay.
My sense is they have the same. There's the same sense as with the watershed land, that they are not inviolable, so to speak.
Right.
I think the tax taking properties they have not been gone through the disposition process to the city from the assessor's office, which is to say the value, the lost assessed value on the property has not been released.
Right. Understood. Yeah.
So it's there's city ownership here, and you can see the green, the blue, and the purple are all and the striped blue, right? It's the water department,
Right.
City of Gloucester Water Department. It's the City of Gloucester Conservation Commission, City of Gloucester outright, and then I would consider the City of Gloucester tax taking parcels to be in the possession of the assessor's office still.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Or the
And I
treasurer.
probably don't have to point out that things that don't have any kind of coding of any kind are, to speak loosely, up for grabs. In other words, private lands that, are not protected, and arguably, since they're within the Dogtown outline, should be. But there's a task for the future.
Those are the gray lands, basically, on stripes.
Yeah, the gray lands. And again, in an upcoming map, those parcels will be made clearer, so that you have a better sense of what that is.
Okay. So, Adrian, despite Chris's concern, wouldn't it be a huge lift to, for example, put a wind farm or a solar farm within watershed, given the concern over deforestation in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, you know, it would be a heavy lift, but
But
it's not
but not
impossible.
inforeseeable. Right.
It's not, yeah, it's not impossible.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of other pressure points would have to be hit to kind of get to that place where that would be a desirable act in that location.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting that it's like, oh, an immediate danger or whatever. I'm just concerned at coding different parcels of land according to the degree of their protection.
Right.
And that's all. That's all.
Yeah, it's important to be aware of limited protection.
Yeah.
You know,
Hey, Chris, a funny
Yes, sir.
question. A funny question for you, Chris.
I like funny
Goose-
questions.
Yeah, Goose Cove isn't shown there at all.
Aha. Right. Yeah.
My
Okay.
home. It
Yeah.
looks like it's all land, but it's, you know, all water in there.
Well, Goose Cove is there. You mean the water body?
The Goose Cove, the water body is not, Goose Cove Reservoir is there, but Goose Cove
Oh, Goose Cove itself.
near
Yes.
Lobster Cove doesn't
yes.
exist.
Okay. Noted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
so listen, everybody, I have to go, but I realize I'm also hosting the meeting. So I'd like to make Cindy the co-host. And I'm just also going to kind of leave it on and let you play through, and I'll watch the other half of this later on tonight. But I just wanted to say thank you all for being here and Happy New Year. And I will follow up with everybody after the meeting and kind of catch up on what it is that you missed. I'm going to stop the screen share so you don't have to watch this all night, of course. And I'll make Cindy the co-host. Hold on.
Great. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Is there anything else we want to discuss under this topic? Okay.
It's really helpful to see it.
It really is. It's really impressive, and I like.
So I'm taking
visuals.
it that the commission is saying that I should proceed with additional additions to this mapping project, kind of. Obviously, I keep you posted on them all.
Yes.
Yeah, and Chris, can you put me in touch with Jim? Because if I
Yes.
can get his shape files, we can do good things with them.
That would be great. Yeah, no, he's very knowledgeable about Dogtown. He's also an environmental consultant, so he's very familiar with tax title explorations and things like that. So yeah, no, I'd be glad to do that.
Great,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah. No, he's a
Okay.
great guy.
All right, everybody. I'll see you next time.
All
Bye,
right.
Take
Adrian.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you. So it's just about 6:30 anyways, but let's talk a little bit about stewardship. One of the things that really stands out to me is the rare plants. I don't know how what others are thinking about stewardship, is maybe thinking about some sort of project to assist in that way.
Totally. I mean, yeah, I think of all of this in terms of habitat restoration. Basically the place has been neglected. It had probably the greatest collection of rarities, and not just plants, but birds, mammals. I have a comprehensive list, and this may give you a chuckle, but it's serious stuff, of the moth fauna of Dogtown, which is significant, including several globally endangered species. And I have a spreadsheet from God on the moths of Dogtown, and actually all of Cape Ann. I also noted today, I'm a trustee at the Native Plant Trust, formerly New England Wildflower Society, Garden in the Woods, and all of that. And they've just put out a publication talking about sustainability of habitats. And I noticed that they published a map. It's a sort of small scale, but I can get a larger scale. That on the map of important plant areas, some of you have heard me talk about important bird areas. Well, New England Wildflower Native Plant Trust has now important plant areas. And when you look at some of the big areas are like in the White Mountains, where a lot of rarities are together. If you look at the map of Massachusetts, most of the rare plant areas are in the west, which, if you know anything, if you know your botany at all, that has to do with soil types and, vegetation types and that kind of thing. There are also, again, significant sites on Nantucket and the Cape and Islands, basically. Other than that, in eastern Massachusetts, the only place that has rare plant sites are Cape Ann. And they, a lot of those, I'm sure, although the map I was looking at doesn't have that scope, are in Dogtown. We know there are something like 14 species of orchids in Dogtown, not all of which are endangered, but Arethusa bulbosa is a globally endangered orchid and is subject to the depredations of the outflow potentially of the compost site, but also mainly perhaps of succession. The fens, these two fens, are gradually succeeding, or not so gradually in some cases. And although the New England Plant Trust has, Native Plant Trust has offered to come and help push back the succession and hopefully have some of these rare orchids come back, so far, and this is long before Adrienne's tenure, but the Conservation Commission said, oh no, they can't do that. That's a wetland. They can't go in and mess around with the wetland. It's like, hello, But in any case, yeah, and I have, when I do my Dogtown talk, one of my Dogtown talks, I talk about how a whole series of birds that were relatively common during the heathland, what I call the sort of the heathland period, you've all seen pictures of, with basically cleared open land with these magnificent big boulders and things. Most of the species, if not all at this point, that throve, if that's a word, during that period are now gone, again, because of succession. And succession that has been sort of ignored. It's like, well, let Dogtown be Dogtown, let nature take its course kind of thing. So yeah, there's a whole spectrum of issues, all the way from, mosses to moths. So that needs to be, and we have, and again, with my mapping friend, who's not just a map, but he was on the original Dogtown committee going back to the 80s and stuff, and knows Dogtown extremely well, and knows where all these various orchid sites are, almost all of them. And between us, we have assembled as extensive a flora and fauna of Dogtown as we can. Some of that we published in the report, the Dogtown report. But one of the things on my to-do list has been to create a comprehensive spreadsheet that said, okay, this is the biota of Dogtown, obviously with columns that indicated these are the endangered species, these are more localized species, these are, important to Cape Ann, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Yeah. There's a lot of, and so needless to say, that implies significant stewardship. I mean, if this were a greenbelt property, but even more so Mass Audubon property, every Mass Audubon sanctuary has an ecological management plan with a complete biological inventory of everything that's there and management recommendations. In some cases, it's leave it alone, but in other cases, it's, mow it or cut it down or whatever. In an ideal world, that's where we ought to be going with Dogtown, as far as I'm concerned.
Chris,
Yes, sir.
you don't actually show on maps where these species are, right? Because I've heard of concern of like, you don't do that because poachers will come and steal them,
yes.
like lady
No. These are all under wraps, so to speak. And you can't, if you tried to go to, heritage and whatever, and get, specific localities for given plants or other species. We have several endangered species of turtles on Cape Ann. You can't get it. Now, having said that, the people that are interested in digging up rare orchids and stealing turtles and whatever, they have their workarounds. I mean, this is a business and a passion for them. And so none of that can be thought of as permanently protected, which is another reason why stewardship is important, to have somebody that knows the landscape, knows, where things are, and is there to protect it. So anyway.
Chris, this
Yeah.
may be far beyond anything we can tackle tonight, but I would love to know more about this. And
Sure.
a question that I would want to pursue is, what are the outside organizations that could help both plan, fund, and carry out some of these, critical habitat stewardship programs for us? It's going to be beyond the capacity of this commission, but can we get others in here to do the work?
Well, I think, from my point of view, it comes down, like everything else, to kind of a funding issue. I mean, I think if we had a intelligent, hopefully somewhat experienced person who would act as, an environmental steward, or whatever you wanted to call them. There are multiple organizations, my former organization, Mass Audubon Society, Greenbelt, or whatever, who could train such a person, so that it's not like we have to, have consultants do all kinds of different things. It's a big deal, as I think I've described. There's a lot of things that need to happen, but also a lot of the work has been done in terms of what's there and where it is. And so really having someone as a protection agent, a knowledgeable protection agent, I think is what's needed. And so there we come back to the usual funding issue. And I think long-term, and hopefully not too long-term, we know that stewardship, not just ecological stewardship, but all the other issues that come up, because there's nobody really patrolling the place, taking care of it, making sure bad stuff doesn't happen, making sure bad things don't happen to people. I mean, it gets back a little bit to the earlier conversation we had about people camping in Dogtown and things like that. I think if we had a good person on the ground, there's lots of training out there that person could get, and that would be a big step. So that's my take on how we would approach that. It's not about calling in different organizations to get their take
I
on
understand.
it. Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I think our first meeting when we talked about hiring somebody and
Exactly.
what that hire would look like. And, we've got some things to float out to the city council pretty soon. And, that's got to be right behind it. It's got to be right behind or parallel to the restoration of the compost facility.
Yeah.
In some ways,
And I think it's
more immediate, maybe more immediate than restoration of the compost facility.
Well, they don't conflict,
I would say
so they
is.
could
Right.
happen
No, it could
simultaneously.
happen together, right?
That's our next item on the agenda, collaboration and additional staffing.
Right.
Yep.
So. All right. Well, does anybody have anything else? I think we have 2 members of the public here. I'll just take them as they're listed. Jeff Brown.
Yes, hi there.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Cindy. Sure, I just had my main question today actually is a follow-up from my question back on November 18th, 2021. I believe you said you were going to look into the Babson deed and to make some comments on that.
Unmute myself. Yeah, Jeff, I did sort of look around the city website and I did not see it on there. And that's as far as I went. I'm really trying to stick to the items that the commission has put on the agenda and go with those. But if there's something specific you could send to me, we could take a look at it.
So you went to the city's website.
Yeah.
And you went to the search box and you entered Babson deed and you didn't get any returns?
No, but I'm not so sure I looked at it like that. I went to the planning and community development. So you just look up Babson deed on the city website? Could you just email us the deed if you have it?
Sure. Is there any way you can get back to me? Because it's been 2 months since I actually asked that initial question, and I'm at today with
And I
sort of, I don't have any
asked you,
information.
I asked you before to send me the deed, and again.
No, you asked me,
we're-
I told you
we're
where it was. You
talking-
asked me if I had a copy of it, and I gave you instructions on how to find it. So I can send you the deed itself, but there's
Okay,
also.
why don't you send me the deed yourself? But you know what? In future meetings, we're just going to talk about items on the agenda.
I thought public comments
what we
was
talk about.
for me. I thought public comments typically for things that aren't on the agenda.
No, that's not what the agenda says. This is public comment. You can make comments, but you can't expect the commission to deliberate on anything you ask or any statements you make because it's not on our agenda. And how would the other members of the public know that we're going to talk about that?
Okay, so let you know, so there's two parts to the deed, right? There's the deed itself. Then there's actually a deed agreement. Now, the deed agreement is not on the website. But what I'm
why don't you send what you have to either me or all members of the commission? Our website, our email addresses are listed on the city page. And if it's something we want to undertake, we will. But as you can see from the agenda we have quite a few priorities, and these are things that we've identified as priorities.
Okay, so a deed covering 1,100 acres in the middle of Dogtown, an area in which you plan to do some stuff, doesn't have any relevance here? Or if it does, when will it come into the picture?
Jeff, you're not asking a specific question. And the last thing I'm going to tell you again is we are discussing things that are on the agenda. Okay? If you want to send us something and we see something on it and we want to put it on a future agenda, we could do that. But you're continuing to speak about matters, asking hypothetical questions, and expecting a commission to deliberate on something that's not on the agenda.
Will the BAPS indeed be on an agenda someday?
Why don't you send the agenda to the commission and let them have a look at it? And why don't you ask a specific question, because you keep skirting around? What is it you want to know? But again, send us the email with your request and we'll take it under advisement. Was that it? Did you have any comments on anything that was discussed at the meeting?
No, I was kind of hoping actually to go through this process sort of like a back and forth, right? I say, I come to public comment, I say something, it's taken into consideration, and then people get back to me and they sort of respond to what I said. And that's what you said you would do.
Why don't you send me an email, Jeff? Because you know what? This really isn't going anywhere.
I agree.
Send me an email with a request and I will send it to the rest of the members. Or you can send it to all the members. As I said, our emails are on the website. I'm not going to guess what it is you're asking.
Okay, I do have some other options I can exercise, but I do.
That's fine.
So, okay, so looking ahead, if I have questions, I can't ask questions that are not on the agenda. Is that correct?
You can email myself or the commission members and ask for something to be on the agenda. But you have to make a specific request of what it's looking at, not just if we looked at a deed. Ask a specific question of what it is you're interested in. Don't be vague. Just ask us what it is you want us to consider, send us the materials, and then we could put it on agenda and then we can talk about it. But we shouldn't be talking.
That's at your discretion, right? It's at your discretion, so it's not a.
But the thing is, Jeff, we really shouldn't be talking about things that aren't on the agenda. What the agenda does is it tells members of the public, this is what the commission is going to speak about. If we've got bananas on the agenda, we should not be talking about oranges. I mean, it's part of, the open meeting law. If you want to send us something on the Babson deed with a specific question for the commission to deliberate, send an email and we can decide whether or not to put it on the agenda. But we don't know what.
Just moving forward, I want to make sure that I come to these meetings and I don't inconvenience anybody.
Well, those are your words, not mine.
Well, okay. So when I have questions next month, I probably will. Those questions have to pertain to something on the agenda. Is that right?
Yes, as part
Okay.
of open meeting law, we can only discuss items that are on the agenda. As a member of the public, if you would like us to put something on the agenda, you can do that. But it's no guarantee it'll be on the agenda. But
Okay.
ask a specific question. Don't just say, what do we think of the Babson deed? You know, and also, and I really, again, I'm not really comfortable talking about things that are not on the agenda.
All right, gosh, I tell you, I see other meetings and they say, well, you know, public comment is open to public to
That's-
speak, provided
that's-
it's not on the agenda.
That is only at the city council level.
Okay,
The only other thing that you can talk about is things that were not anticipated when you set the
open
agenda.
space
That
doesn't
come
allow you
between-
to talk about stuff on the agenda. They're not city council.
Well, that's open space, but I'm telling you, as part of open meeting law, you're really only deliberating on stuff on the agenda.
Okay, so city council doesn't want you on the agenda. Open space says, okay, don't talk about anything on the agenda.
Jeff,
The Dogtown
Jeff, you know
Preservation
what?
Commission.
Jeff,
Okay.
you know what? I am about to mute you because really you're just taking time from the commission without any real benefit. Okay? Are you done?
Actually, no, but again, I
Okay.
don't want to, if I'm inconveniencing
I'm going
you,
you're not inconveniencing me. It's just
Okay.
you're arguing with me. And you're not arguing or asking anything of the commission that's been on the agenda. And, you know, it should only just be a few minutes and you spend your few minutes just arguing things and you know, it's just not.
You're dismissing what I'm bringing to the table. You're dismissing.
No,
it.
but if you want
Yes,
to
you
bring,
are. I feel marginalized. I
Well,
feel like I'm
Jeff,
being dismissed.
if
I do
you
not
want to
feel that what I'm bringing into the picture is not taking.
You know what, Jeff? If you feel like you want to bring something to the table, I've given you the procedures to do. You send an email to myself or the other members of the commissioner. You ask us a specific question you want us to consider and send us any materials that you will help it. And then we can decide whether or not it's going to be on the agenda. Okay? All right, I'm moving along now.
Thank you. You just unmuted
I'm
me.
moving along now,
That's-
Jeff.
Go ahead. That's
Mark?
fine. Yeah.
Mark, would you like to speak?
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, okay. Did you not want to speak?
No, I don't. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you. I'll mute you. Okay. All right, do we want to set the meeting for next time?
Sure.
Sure.
So Val did send us an email that said that she can make the fourth Thursdays of the month. So do we just want to stay with that?
And didn't Mike have some issues about a timing as well?
He did, but he didn't weigh in on the email if the fourth Thursday is going to be a problem. You want to wait till we can, till I can contact him and see what times are good for him, because it would be good to have him here.
Absolutely.
Yes,
It would help, yes.
exactly.
So conceivably the 24th of February.
Right, but let's keep that open until we can connect with Mike.
Great.
Okay, so if there's no further business, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Second.
Did you get that, Richard?
You can
Yeah.
interpret that any way
Yeah.
you like, Richard.
I
Okay,
have
by,
CD, I have CL and LN.
Yeah. all right, by roll call, Rich,
Yes, please.
Leslie,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Okay, it is
6:52.
6:52. All right.
Thank you,
good night,
Cindy,
all.
especially for that last episode.
Oh,
Yes.
you're
Thank you,
welcome.
Cindy.
Thank you
Take
for your,
care.
yes, thank you for your leadership there. Most
Take
appreciated.
care.
Thanks.
Bye all.
Bye.